majority of the world's rural poor depend on agriculture and natural resources for their livelihoods. As a marginalized and geographically dispersed community, they face major social and economic problems which hinders from improving their lives and that of their families. According to a report from the World Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO), this reality is particularly challenging African women, youth, and indigenous peoples, as they often bear the bitter taste of economic disparity that hinder equal access to land, resources, education, information, and opportunities to participate in development process. Having access to financial services helps people improve their lives and reduce poverty, as it has been witnessed in the social progress achieved in South Asia in the past 4 decades. The experience of South Asian countries like Bangladesh and other regions demonstrate that microfinance can deliver positive effects when it is combined and integrated effectively with other economic and social programs. Since the emergence of microfinance modalities as a means of reaching rural communities in recent years, many Africans are getting the chance to use small funds to change their lives accordingly. Microfinance, which is the provision of a variety of financial services to destitute low-income people and micro and small enterprises that lack access to banking and related services, is proving vital to empowering communities. Experts agree that microfinance, when properly utilized, can economically empower individuals and small enterprises in enabling them contribute to and fairly benefit from economic development.
It's very clear that the microfinance industry is growing. The focus on the underserved and the unserved markets has increased. So there is certainly acceptance and the realization that microfinance has got a very big part to play in terms of financial inclusion and, of course, the economic development of any country for that matter.
Major product that we actually offer is lending. We have various products for lending, which span from group loans, micro enterprise loans. We also do some salary-based loans as well, and also loans for the SMEs.
There's a lot of saturation in particular areas, regions, like in the town centers, because there's possibility of many organizations within the same region. But I think when you go to the rural areas where they actually deserve, all these services, the presence is still very scanty.
The UN's report on microfinance argues that this relatively new trend offers significant opportunities for African countries to fully unleash the private sector's potential and contribute to addressing emerging and long-lasting development challenges such as poverty, income inequality, high levels of unemployment, particularly amongst its youth.
The low-income people, or even those segments which were underserved, or some of them were not served at all in terms of financial services, they also need to be capacitated so that they can be economically, enabled, to sustain, their living. So our intervention is to enable them to be viable in terms of whatever they are doing. So we come in there in terms of technical assistance, in terms of financial assistance, so that they can, be able to do their, projects, as it were.
In Africa, there are several people, several adults, approximately 330 million adults lack access to a bank account. There are also millions of SMEs and MSMEs who lack access to funding. We do have a mandate to enhance access to financial services by lower income population. And in that regard, we have several types of financial instruments to support financial institutions and SMEs provide financial services to the unbanked.
Despite the disparity within regions of the continent, African governments have set goals to reach their people living in the hard-to-reach areas through investments in the sector. They've made the playing ground suitable for the private sector to operate as well.
We've seen these days a great improvement in terms of regulation, because regulation was the greatest challenge faced by the MFIs to operate in order to easily operate in different environments.
Also, good development that they're actually putting in place is to do with the collateral registry system. Obviously, if you are looking at markets where you are going rural, in the rural areas, you are actually looking at individuals probably who are limited in terms of having assets which are well registered. But if we are then able to tap into the assets, the movable assets that they have in their possessions, and we are able to register even in terms of collateral, it certainly goes a long way in trying to unlock the value that is actually in those assets. So I think those are the good initiatives that we actually have. And
in Africa, regulation varies from one country to another. In some countries, like in West Africa, there is a central bank which is common to a number of countries, I think 8 countries. And their regulation is the same for everyone. So in the other countries, there is no integration, and each country will have their own regulation.
Ethiopia has been very good at putting regulation together and making sure that there's harmony in terms of and sharing knowledge about the microfinance industry here. In other countries that are trying to establish an apex institution of a microfinance institution can learn a lot from what, let's say, for example, Ethiopia has actually done in terms of having an industry that has been sharing information. But again, being able to attract investors in a particular country, I think it's important to have one voice and doing things together, because an investor wants to come and look at that market as a whole.
For a continent with close to 70% young population, where majority of them living in rural areas, microfinance institutions, MFIs, are presenting opportunities in the agriculture, energy, and micro and small enterprises level, helping the youth transform itself using small funds it borrows from them.
Especially in the rural setups, it's more of agriculture. And also some who are actually into, production. You look at things like peanut butter making. You also look at poultry, piggery, and animal husbandry. And I think the majority of them, if we are looking at the rural finance schemes that we actually have, the majority, that is where they actually deploy their funds. Some in the areas of agriculture, we also have individuals who are actually into irrigation schemes. And I think the majority of them, this is where probably they need assistance in terms of buying their irrigation pipes, the pumps. You also look at inputs, buying the inputs, the fertilizers, and the like.
We are very keen on particular sectors in which these microfinance institutions are operating. Some of the key sectors that we care about is agriculture. The reason we do that is because we know a lot of the farming activities are not financially included from the formal financial sector. And so we try to focus our money to go to programs that are promoting agriculture. Another area that we think perhaps has good social impact is education. So if you have microfinance institutions in with the programs that are trying to promote education, let's say school fees loans, or people to be able to go back to education, that's an area that we try to finance.
The African microfinance industry is diverse and geographically dispersed. A variety of approaches, ranging from the use of agent and village community banks, and traditional group-based systems to specialized lending by various institutions. Despite the institutions operating in the traditional sphere, technology-based actors, better known as fintechs, by those in the area, are also coming on board, diversifying the capacity and accessibility of service provision.
Mobile network operators changed the game because they are bringing now solutions, financial solutions, where the formal microfinance sector is not yet to offer the services. And we have now a new trend, which are bigger banks, bigger or regional banks, which are also opening or starting microfinance activities.
Today, the digital technology allows financial services providers to know their customers better, to track their activity, to build data from which they can assess the creditworthiness of their clients, rather than, for instance, requiring excessive collateral. They can build systems to assess creditworthiness. And I believe today MFIs can highly rely on big data to address the financial inclusion gap.
Africa is among the country that have the highest penetration rate in terms of mobile phones. So this is very important this is a great opportunity for the MFIs. They can leverage these opportunities.
So with our software, everything within the microfinance institutions is automated, and all does have to do the microfinance managers and accountants and other people working for microfinance institutions. And when they come to work in the morning, just open the computer, they get connected to the servers, and they have all the information they need to serve their clients. So it's a mission-critical application that needs to work perfectly on a daily basis. So beside that, we also provide mobile banking applications that will allow microfinance and beneficiaries. That means people who get financial services through microfinance institutions to access to their accounts through their mobile phones.
This has come both as a challenge and an opportunity for those institutions that are to have physical presence in the places they serve through branches.
So right now there's so much opportunity, and just to enumerate some of the benefits that you can get from this, I've talked about low cost, which is extremely low. I've talked about speed, but microfinance banks can use it to actually move funds back and forth. They can use the platform to actually raise funds. That's one thing that microfinance institutions really need. They can actually raise money on this platform. And it also helps them to collaborate. So one microfinance bank can work with another microfinance bank on the platform and give a joint loan to somebody instead of bearing all the risk. So the platform is very flexible, and it allows lots of things to be done on it.
Technology is here to stay, and it's dynamic. It's going to continue to improve. If you're going to, as an organization, to stick to your old way of doing things, I think you become extinct. So yes, Zimbabwe is also a growing market, and we're facing the same. It's not a challenge. It's a level of development worldwide. So we have telecoms, we have got fintech companies. Personally, my view is that I don't look at them as competitors. I think we collaborate. I may be weak in one area, which can be covered by a fintech company. So if we collaborate, I think that's the way to go. That's the way I look at it. Yeah, so we do have those developments in terms of fintech companies, MNOs also coming into the space. But I think it's more of working together.
So the traditional microfinance industry needs to rebuild itself to face, especially try to use technology so that they can continue offer services to the poorest in the very remote areas of Africa. And if they do not rebuild themselves, if they do not embrace the technology to leverage the outreach, they may be seriously threatened in the coming years because of the other big players are pretty doing the same job. They are also targeting the people on the bottom of the poverty line, offering them tailor-made services.
Obviously need to actually embrace the technology as well. Why? Because it actually comes with it the benefits in terms of reduction, in terms of cost reduction. So I think technology is actually a good development. We would really look forward to also even partnering with some of the fintechs so that we can also ride on the technology so that we can be able to, instead of us looking at growing in terms of establishing the physical branches, which are even more expensive, we are keen to actually identify other methods of delivering our products which are actually cost effective.
Operators in the sector speak about the challenges they face and the gaps that both governments and the actors must bridge in order to leverage what microfinance institutions have to do for those underprivileged members of the community.
For the microfinance institutions, in terms of our licensing with the regulator, we still have 1-year licenses which we actually renew on an annual basis. And obviously this gives us challenges probably if you are looking at aspects to do with trying to source funding.
In Africa generally, infrastructure is a problem. Good roads, electricity, water, and all that. But we are trying to surmount that because we have introduced, like you said, the telecom operators. We brought them on board. There's something called the mobile money in Central Bank, mobile banking. So we can reach the grassroots and the interiors on your mobile handsets, and then some people go around to educate them.
Urgent areas is really capacity. Before you can access funding to develop your business, there has to be some type of capacity built to provide confidence to the financial institution, to financial service providers, to support you as a microfinance entity. So governments need to have the right policies for financial and digital literacy, develop their human capital strategies, develop some type of incubators for the youth to allow them to have bankable projects. So for me, these are priority areas that needs to be addressed along with the financing.
As they are established mainly for profit, the interest rates of microfinance institutions are high, which concern African governments.
They are in the business for profit making, you understand? So the central bank intervening on behalf of the federal government is to bring down those exorbitant interest rates and to make the credit readily available to the sector that is to be channeled at. So central bank comes in to bring down the interest rates. Like for instance, most of the intervention schemes for central bank, where they float bonds and raise the credit, the interest rate is pegged at between 7 and 9%, as against what the deposit money banks will charge, running from 22 to 24%. This to make it available to the grassroots.
Actors who already know the African microfinance market say there is yet untapped potential for newcomers for many good reasons.
I have actually observed that the market is still quite huge, and in some cases you may not even be able to exhaust the whole market by yourself, or even the existing players who are currently there at the moment. They do have different strategies. They do have different target markets. Some of them, they're actually looking at a niche market. So I think there's still an opportunity for new players to actually come on board and also try to offer new products that suit certain segments of the market.
If you look at the financial access, is still very low. And it's, as I said, it's different from country to country. I think in Kenya, for instance, the financial access has been improving purely because of the innovative ways in which delivery of microfinance products have been done through mobile technology and all that stuff. In other countries in West Africa, for instance, where there is no such facilities or technology, the access is still very low. So even in Kenya, where the access seemingly is a bit high, we still have huge unmet demand. So in my view and from our experience, there's still huge, there's still huge chances for organizations to expand the outreach.
According to the UN, microfinance institutions in Africa still lack the capacity to match the needs of low-income people as they suffer from structural weaknesses. African governments, in cooperation with development partners, could therefore play a fundamental role in consolidating the microfinance sector by providing even appropriate policies and regulatory and legal frameworks in addition to availing soft and hard infrastructure for the institutions to operate. Even though microfinance alone would not fundamentally transform African economies, it can play an essential part for the foreseeable future in providing basic financial services to the unprivileged and thereby help advance the continent's development goals.
Over the past 2 decades, Ethiopia has been striving to revitalize the export sector. The government has designed various strategies to take the country's business activities to the next high level. Though it lacks a good track record, the export business remains high on the government's development agenda. The government is making use of numerous strategies to stimulate the export sector. Creating favorable investment climate for foreign direct investment is one of such interventions. The government is expanding industrial parks in different corners of the country to that end. The manufacturing sector plays a pivotal role in stimulating the economy of any nation. Considering this, the expansion of integrated agro-industrial parks are given prime focus in Ethiopia's development plan. Currency devaluation is one of the mechanisms used by different countries ultimately to support the export sector. The move taken by the Ethiopian government would stimulate foreign investors to invest in the country.
There isn't just one reason why countries devalue their currency, but usually, and I've spent many years in countries that constantly devalue their currencies, such as Brazil, such as Argentina in the late 80s and early 90s. So I've actually gone through that process working in these countries and other countries as well. So the primary reason for devaluing a currency is sometimes it's to enhance export competitiveness. This is when we're talking about a positive, proactive, what I call currency management. There are some that are drastically forced to devalue currencies because there are issues beyond their control, like complete loss of confidence in the currency.
The currency devaluation announced by Ethiopian government is the other important strategy intended to enhance export. The devaluation will have the capacity to revitalize the export business through imposing exponential rate, which is more directed towards benefiting the foreign investors.
Ethiopian government devalues its currency mainly for promoting export but not only for promoting export, reduce the demand for foreign currency and increase the availability of foreign currency. If we see that the value of the Ethiopian birr was getting higher compared to foreign currencies in relative term, and that was expressed by the existence of the black market. Some 5 years ago, in 2010, when after they take devaluation, the black market rate and the official rate was very close, indicating that the birr value was having its real value. But after sometimes, and particularly recently, the black market rate was higher than the official rate, indicating that birr has been overvalued, that the price of US dollar or foreign currency was lower unnecessarily. That means that when the birr value is higher, then our products in the foreign market will be expensive.
When we devalue the currency, how does it promote the export? That's the question that we have to ask. If we take, for example, coffee and gold, they fetch better money in Ethiopia than outside because the level of the exchange rate is very, very low. Now that the exchange rate is better, exporters will have the incentive to export more coffee instead of selling it in country, and to export more gold instead of selling it in country. But this rationale also has some questions attached to it, because one of the primary impact of devaluation is the parallel market, or what you call the black market. For example, today what's happened is with the devaluation of 15%, the official rate has gone to 27 and the parallel market has gone to 33. So the coffee producers would ideally put in 15% more in their products. The business have put 15% in their products. So when we see it from this point of view, the devaluation will not have impact in promoting exports.
Currency by itself is not sufficient, right? So in the case of Ethiopia, it's planning, it's invested a lot, it will continue to invest a lot. Foreign direct investment is coming very substantially. This past year, it was amongst the 5 top FDI destinations in Africa, $3.2 billion, for almost nothing 8 years ago. So to continue to attract FDI, why would a foreign investor come to Ethiopia? Because he's hoping and he's expecting his products produced in Ethiopia will be competitive.
The government is primarily striving to energize the economy by intensifying and diversifying the export sector. Expanding the manufacturing sector through improving the management is one of the interventions in this regard. This is primarily by intensifying agro-processing sector. In doing so, the country would reduce its dependency on foreign imports.
As one of the fastest growing economies, what we need is more and more capital that should fuel investment. Now, what really happens when foreign investors come to Ethiopia is they bring money from their country's banks or from other international banks, and that they would be given probably a percentage of loans from the Development Bank of Ethiopia or from the Commercial Bank of Ethiopia, and then they would be investing. This would inhibit access to Ethiopian investors, the possibility of having foreign capital if these banks were in Ethiopia.
Import dependency through import substitution is the other reason why the country devalued its currency. It is a strategy used by any developing nation to enhance its economic growth and improve the economic situation in the world.
If they wanted to penetrate a market and they feel like by devaluing their currency they can do that, they were doing that. It's a very smart move that's worked beautifully for the Chinese. So one reason for devaluing would be to enhance export competitiveness. The flip side of that is to discourage imports, which means that you're making imports more expensive. That means consumption locally of imported goods, you hope, will reduce, and guess what? Will be substituted. This is the theoretical concept. You hope it will be substituted by domestic production.
The export-led economic growth is the prime intent of the government earnestly striving to achieve. To this end, the government is adopting policies of organizing the selection of goods to produce domestically.
We have a lot of macroeconomic policies that we have to look into. Number one, to promote foreign direct investment, we need to look into what foreign direct investors are looking for. The ease of investing in Ethiopia, the ease of doing business in Ethiopia, which according to the World Bank report is very, very low compared to many other countries. So what we need to do, frankly, in this sense is to have a general review of our macroeconomic policy.
Having a strong manufacturing sector would enable the country to enhance its revenue from the export sector. Protecting the industry is one way to have a strong manufacturing industry. The government is making incessant effort to expand domestic industries, which become backbone in boosting the economy.
In order to enhance the export sector, as it is known that the export sector is the backbone for the national economy, and we are also aggressively working to realize our GDP plan that highly contribute for our Renaissance goal and plan. So we plan to enter into middle economic status, and also by doing this we will be one of the middle income status nation of the world, so that we are aggressively working for in that regard. So the export sector has a good advantage and also contributes significantly for the fast and sustainable economic development in terms of earning the required foreign exchange or currency, so as to expand infrastructure at all levels.
To alleviate major challenge seen in the export sector, the government and pertinent stakeholders are working hand in hand. Adding values to export products is one of the elements that should be given more emphasis to further returns on the sector.
The Ethiopian government is devaluing, and the main reason that the National Bank of Ethiopia, which is the agency that manages monetary policy, is that they would like to export more of Ethiopian goods, and of course to be able to adjust the balance of payments so that we get more from our exports to balance the amount of imports that we have. If this devaluation is justified, then we have to look at several options that the government would have in terms of its general macroeconomic policy, including the fiscal policy and monetary policy, and then look also how Ethiopia could cope with its export-based and industrial production.
The move taken by the government, mainly to improve export business, would likely increase the influx of foreign direct investment into the country.
There are too many things we import in this country unnecessarily when we can manufacture them domestically. I've always given this very simplistic example just to capture people's mind. You go to any grocery store in Addis or any of the regional capital cities, 90% of the items on the supermarket shelf are imported. It just defies logic. First, the market is here. There's obviously 100 million consumers. So if the market is here and a lot of the stuff can be produced locally, why are we importing? The simple example I give is juice. We import packet juice from the Middle East, from the desert. Countries in the middle of a desert. Even though the raw citrus, the orange, whatever, probably was exported from Ethiopia. But we buy it back as packet juice for much more value than we exported the raw citrus. You can expand that in a lot of things. Coffee, we export raw coffee. Yeah, there's some element we should, but why don't we add value to that? So by devaluing your currency, one of the things you hope to do is import substitution, discourage imports, and local manufacturers who hopefully will take the place and expand both for the domestic and the export market.
Devaluation is one way of promoting the export sector, but it's not the only solution. If we see the means for promoting export is devaluation is one, but there are other reasons. So the productivity of the export sector has to increase so that the cost declines and then will be competitive in the international market. So productivity is very important. So that's one reason why productivity has not been improved in this export sector, or be it in agricultural productivity or industrial productivity.
Improving the currency rate would also optimize and create favorable conditions for the export business. The expansion of manufacturing industries becomes impetus for increasing employment and earning foreign exchange.
If you have an overvalued currency, the price of the export commodities in the international market will be higher, so they are less competitive, and when it is returned into birr, then the local exporter, all those local products which are exportable products, the price will be very low. They get less income.
Expanding the agro-processing and mineral industries is the priority of the government to strengthen the capital-intensive economy. In doing so, investors would significantly make use of the viable opportunity by supporting the young, productive part of the society.
Ethiopia is on the early stages of industrial transformation. Okay? I can make an argument either way that we're at primary commodity exports today. Is there a value of devaluing the currency? You can make a theoretical argument saying maybe not. But you can also say, well, I'm looking down the road, a year or two or three, when my value addition export is very significant. So I want to support it right now. All right? There isn't a perfect argument for these things. What I know happens, in this case, I think what the government has said is, listen, export has been stagnant for 3 years. I mean, I've tracked the numbers. We export less than what the tourism sector generates in hard currency. That just doesn't make any sense. Last year, Ethiopia generated $3.2 billion, the official data says $3.2 billion from tourism. Export, you know how much it was? 2.9 billion. In fact, something really worrisome we need to look at. That 2.9 billion is not too far off for how much money Ethiopia spends on fuel imports.
The government is determined to alleviate the hindrances in the export sector. Improving basic infrastructures such as road and electrifications are some of the leading development agendas held up by Ethiopia to enhance export competitiveness. The impressive economic and social developments that have been registered in Ethiopia over the last decades are part of the overall progress achieved through the mega projects undertaken in the country. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Hydropower Dam is one of the notable giant undertakings which becomes audacious hope for the advancement of the nation.
If we want to promote exports and increase our export earning, devaluation is one, but we have to take similar actions on other factors that affect the export sector.
Ethiopia's attempt in realizing export competitiveness is being seen through the infrastructure development taking place in the country as well. The effort in the sector is showing remarkable progress in enhancing the export sector. As export is a vital means for securing foreign exchange, Ethiopia is intently striving to improve the sector.